67 years on this earth, and the most risky thing I ever did was learn how to stay patient. My name is Jonathan McCarthy. I live in a cream-colored colonial house on Birchwood Lane in Naperville. It's a nice neighborhood, good schools, even though our kids had already grown up and moved out. The kind of street where neighbors wave at each other from their driveways, and nobody really means it. I had a wife named Paula, a business, a life that looked from the outside like something people would admire. It wasn't. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab something to eat, sit back, and remember that the people in these stories always had a chance to do the right thing. They just made the wrong choice. Leave a comment and make sure to subscribe. You're going to enjoy it here. On a Tuesday night in October, at exactly 11:04 p.m., my wife walked through the front door smelling like a hotel minibar. She looked straight at me across the kitchen table and smiled like she had just won a prize. I was finishing a bowl of leftover chicken soup, homemade. I made it myself. "You know what happened today, Jonathan?" she said. Not asked, said. Like she was reading from something she had practiced in the car. I put my spoon down and looked at her. "I assume it's not good since you've been ignoring my calls since 9 this morning." She leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. That smile. I can still see it, spreading across her face like a crack in dry concrete. "I had a one-night stand with Craig," she said. Then she paused, like she wanted the moment to sink in. "My boss, and honestly, I'd do it again." The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator made its usual low hum. Outside, someone's dog barked twice and then went quiet. I picked my spoon back up. "Soup's getting cold," I said. Here's what Paula expected. Maybe tears. Definitely shouting. Plates being thrown, doors slammed, some big emotional breakdown that would prove to her she still had power over me. That after 31 years of marriage, she could still reach inside me and shake everything apart. Here's what she actually got. A 67-year-old man calmly finishing his soup. What she didn't realize yet was that I had stopped being the man she expected about 6 months earlier. "That's it?" she said. Now there was a sharp edge in her voice. Not guilt, not even pride. Disappointment. Like she had been waiting for a big scene and didn't get one. "I just told you I slept with Craig Hendricks and you're eating soup?" "It's good soup," I said. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she made a sound that was half a laugh and half disgust, turned, and went upstairs. I stayed there another 20 minutes. I finished the soup, washed the bowl, dried it, and put it back in the cabinet. Then I walked out to the garage, sat inside my 2019 Ford F-150, and allowed myself exactly 4 minutes to feel everything I wasn't going to show her. 4 minutes. After that, it was only planning. Let me tell you about Craig Hendricks. Craig was 51, recently divorced, and the type of man who wore tight blazers even on casual Fridays, and called everyone Chief like it made him sound important. He had hired Paula 8 years earlier as an operations manager at Hendricks Logistics, a mid-sized freight company based in Lisle, about 12 minutes from our house. She moved up quickly. I'll give her credit for that. She was good at what she did. Smart, organized, and the kind of person who could smile at you while quietly noticing all your weaknesses. I used to admire that about her. Looking back now, I should have been more careful. I was almost sure the affair had happened before. Maybe not this exact situation, not with the dramatic speech at the kitchen door, but something had been off for at least 2 years. The late nights that didn't match her work hours. The new laugh she had, lighter, almost fake, that she only used when she was on her phone. The way she stopped asking about my day, and instead gave me a silence that wasn't peaceful, just empty. But when you're 67 and you've spent over 3 decades building a life with someone, you don't rush to conclusions. You observe. You take mental notes. You make sure before you act. And I had made sure. My business was called McCarthy & Associates Property Management. We started it together back in 2003. I had the construction experience, and Paula had the organizational skills. We managed residential properties across DuPage County. At our best, we had 42 units under contract and a reputation strong enough that people recommended us without being asked. On paper, it was equally ours. That's the important part. On paper. I never fully understood why she still chose to go work for Craig 8 years ago when she already had a share in our company. She told me his business was larger, that she didn't want to spend the rest of her life doing property management. She said she wanted to try something different. I respected that. I handed most of the daily responsibilities to a manager and told her to go build something for herself. Turns out she did. Just not the kind of thing I expected. I didn't completely understand it back then, but I do now. What Paula didn't know, and what I made very sure she would never know, was that 14 months earlier, I had sat down with our lawyer, a sharp and very private woman named Christine Knight, at her office on Washington Street in downtown Naperville. That's when I quietly began a careful and completely legal restructuring of McCarthy and Associates. It started after a conversation with my oldest friend, Dave Kowalski. Dave and I go back a long way. We worked construction together in our 30s. We went through enough cold Chicago winters to earn the right to speak honestly to each other. We met for lunch at a place called Quigley's Pub on a Wednesday afternoon in August, the year before everything changed. I told him what I suspected. "You think she's seeing someone else?" Dave asked, halfway through a sandwich, completely calm about it. "I think she's been somewhere else for a long time," I said. "I just don't know if it's a person yet." "So what are you going to do?" I stirred my coffee and looked out the window at the people walking along Jefferson Avenue. Everyone moving quickly like they had somewhere important to be. "I'm going to find out for sure," I said. "And then I'm going to make sure that if I leave clean." Dave put his sandwich down and looked at me seriously, maybe for the first time in decades. "Jonathan, how long have you been thinking about this?" "Long enough," I said, "to stop reacting emotionally." He didn't fully understand what I meant at the time. He would later. By October, by the night of the soup, this is what was true. McCarthy and Associates had been quietly and carefully reorganized over the previous 6 months. My name was still on all the public documents, the website, the branding. But the real operating side of the business, the one with the contracts, the clients, the actual income, had been moved into a new LLC. Christine had helped me set it up in a way that was precise and clean, the kind of work that leaves no loose ends. Paula was still listed as co-owner of the original company. The original company now had 3 clients, a storage unit full of old files, and a bank account with $400 in it. The new company had everything else. For 6 months, she had been coming home every night as a co-owner of something that was basically empty. And she had no idea. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not naturally a revengeful person. I grew up as a carpenter's son in Joliet. I married my college girlfriend. I worked hard and built something real. I believed in fairness. I paid my taxes. I held doors open for people. I made homemade chicken soup on Tuesdays. But I also watched my father lose everything in a divorce. He was left with nothing but his truck and his self-respect. And the one piece of advice he gave me, standing in a parking lot outside a courthouse, stayed with me forever. "Jonathan," he said, "when it's over, make sure you're the one who decides when." I never forgot that. Our joint checking account, the one Paula used for groceries and her regular manicures at Lux Nail Bar, had, by Monday morning before her little confession, a balance of $0.14. I had moved everything into a separate account in my own name at a different bank the Friday before. Carefully, calmly, like someone paying a normal bill. The 14 cents I left behind, that was done on purpose. Call it a sense of humor. The savings, the real savings, the full 31 years of compounding choices and careful sacrifice had been moved step by step over 4 months, slowly, in amounts that didn't set off automatic alerts. Christine had guided me on the setup. Everything I did stayed within the law. Everything I did was recorded. Everything I did was defensible in court, which is the only standard that really matters when you're 67, and you've finally decided to stop waiting. I came back inside from the garage at 11:41 p.m. The house was quiet. The lights upstairs were off. Paula had already gone to bed, actually asleep, with the easy confidence of someone who believed tomorrow would be just like today. I stood in the kitchen for a minute, looking around at the cream-colored cabinets, the subway tile backsplash we had debated for 3 weeks back in 2015, the small hook by the back door where I had hung my keys every night for 19 years. Then I walked to the hall closet and took out 3 bags I had packed 4 days earlier. My clothes, my documents, every original, every record, everything with my name attached, and wrapped carefully in 2 layers of moving blankets, my mother's portrait, a small oil painting of Mary McCarthy done in 1974 by a local artist in Joliet, the only thing in the house that truly could not be replaced. She was coming with me. She always had been. I carried the bags out to the truck in 3 quiet trips. At 12:17 a.m. on Wednesday morning, I backed out of the driveway on Birchwood Lane for the final time. I didn't leave a note. I didn't make a call. I didn't need to. She had already given me everything I needed at the kitchen door. And when Paula McCarthy woke up at 7:30 the next morning, walked downstairs expecting coffee in bed, and instead found an empty house, an empty account, and a business she believed she co-owned that was now worth exactly $400, she was going to laugh. I was counting on that, because the people who laugh first are usually the ones who haven't checked everything yet. There's a certain kind of silence that fills a house when the person who built half of it is gone. Not a calm silence. I mean the kind of silence that feels heavy, that pushes against the walls and makes every familiar thing look a little off, like the furniture has been moved just slightly in the night. Paula found that silence at 7:31 a.m. on a Wednesday in October. I know the exact time because Dave Kowalski was parked 1 street over in his Silverado, sipping gas station coffee and watching the front of the house on Birchwood Lane at my request. He texted me at 7:31. Light came on upstairs. By then, I was already 40 minutes away, sitting in a corner booth at a Denny's off I-88 near Aurora, eating eggs I couldn't even taste, watching my phone like it was some kind of trigger. I want to be clear about something. I didn't enjoy this, not in the way people imagine revenge feels, all warmth and satisfaction. What I felt that morning was closer to the feeling after surgery. Relief that it was done. Exhaustion from what it took. A quiet certainty that it had been necessary. Dave texted again at 7:44. She just opened the front door, looked up and down the street, went back inside. Then at 7:52, she's on the phone, pacing in the kitchen window. "You want me to stay?" he asked. "Give it another hour," I typed back. He sent a coffee cup emoji. Dave mostly communicates in emojis when he's trying not to add commentary. It's his version of staying neutral. The call came at 8:09. I let it ring 4 times. Not to be dramatic, just because I was chewing toast and I believe in finishing what I start. Jonathan. Her voice was controlled, careful, the same voice she used in business meetings when something had gone wrong and she needed to act like it hadn't. "Where are you?" "Good morning, Paula." "Don't." A short pause. "Where are your things?" "With me." Silence. Then, and I will give her credit because she was always composed, "Okay. So you needed space. I understand that. What I said last night was harsh and Paula," I said, "I think we should talk about this like adults, because 31 years doesn't just—" "Paula." She stopped. "Check the bank account," I said, "then call me back." I ended the call and went back to my toast. She didn't call back in 5 minutes. Not in 10 either. I knew exactly what she was doing. Sitting at the kitchen island with her laptop open, logging into the joint account, seeing the 0, telling herself it had to be a mistake, calling the bank's automated line, entering the account number again, waiting, refreshing, watching $400 become the entire picture. No. Wait, that was the business account. Dave texted at 8:24. She just got in her car. I sent a message to Christine Knight. She replied in less than a minute. I've been expecting your text. Everything is in order. Call me after 10. Christine Knight was 54, Yale Law, and carried the energy of someone who had seen every kind of human mistake and stopped being surprised by any of it years ago. She handled my restructuring with the precision of a watchmaker and the silence of a priest. I trusted her completely, which is something I could say about very few people and absolutely no institutions. Back in September, she had warned me that the time between Paula discovering the situation and hiring a lawyer would be short. She's smart, Christine had said, reviewing the documents I brought her. How smart? I asked. Smart enough to confess early if she thinks it helps her control the story, I had said. She thought telling me first would give her the advantage. Christine had looked over her glasses at me. Did it work? I had already moved the accounts the Friday before, I told her. She gave a small, professional smile, genuinely impressed. Jonathan, you continue to be my favorite client. I didn't tell her she was competing with my chicken soup for that position. Paula drove to the office of a family lawyer named Gerald Fitch on Ogden Avenue in Downers Grove. I found that out later. Gerald Fitch had a 3-star Google rating, a website that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2011, and a reputation as a fighter, the kind of attorney who makes up for lack of polish with aggression. She found him quickly. I'll give her that. She was in his office by 9:15 a.m. I know because my daughter, Renee, who lives in Evanston and had been on my side since I quietly told her everything 3 weeks earlier, saw Paula's Acura in the parking lot while driving to work. She sent me a picture and 4 words. Dad, she moved fast. I replied, so did I. What Gerald Fitch was about to learn once he started digging through records was that there wasn't much left to fight over in the way she expected. The house on Birchwood Lane was in both our names. That was true. That was her one strong card. But McCarthy and Associates, the real one, with 41 active property management contracts, the operating accounts, the equipment, and the client relationships built over 20 years, that company never had Paula's name on it. Not once. The original LLC she co-owned was still there, untouched, clean, holding $400 in a storage unit on Naper Boulevard, with 11 years of paper files and a broken Keurig. I left the Keurig on purpose. I'm not completely heartless. Christine called me at 10:03. She's retained Gerald Fitch, she said right away. He'll likely go after the business first. That's where he'll assume the value is. And when he looks, he'll find exactly what we prepared for him to find. I could hear a slight satisfaction in her voice. The original LLC is properly documented and currently worth about 414s. The 14 cents is a nice detail, by the way. I thought so too. Jonathan, she continued, pausing slightly, he will also argue dissipation of marital assets. He'll say you moved money to limit her share. Can he prove that? He can argue it. Proving it is something else. We documented every transfer. Each one has a legitimate business purpose attached. The restructuring started 14 months ago, well before any legal action. Your paper trail is... She paused again. Careful. I used to be a carpenter, I said. We measure twice. I drove back toward Naperville around noon. Not to Birchwood Lane. I had rented a room at an extended stay place on Deal Road. Nothing special, just the kind of place with thin walls and a coffee maker fixed to the counter. Room 114. I paid for a month in cash. Dave met me there for lunch. He brought sandwiches from Portillo's, Italian beef dipped properly, the way it should be, and sat on the edge of the bed while I ate at the small desk near the window. She called her sister, Dave said. How do you know that? He shrugged like it wasn't worth explaining, like some things just get known if you pay attention long enough. I nodded and took another bite, chewing slowly this time, finally able to taste something. Outside, a car passed, tires humming softly on the road, and for the first time that day, everything felt quiet in a way that didn't press down on me. Not empty, not heavy, just quiet enough to think, and maybe, for the first time in a long while, quiet enough to begin again. Brenda mentioned it to Mike. Mike passed it to Carol. And Carol called me early this morning asking if I had any idea where you were. He slowly unwrapped his sandwich and shook his head. Small town, he said with a quiet laugh. It's actually a city with around 150,000 people, and still somehow everything travels fast. He took a bite and kept talking. Carol says Paula is telling people that you had some kind of breakdown, that you left suddenly in the middle of the night without saying anything, and now she's acting worried about you. I paused and thought about that for a second. She's controlling the narrative? I said. Yeah, he replied. She's going to describe you as unstable, unpredictable, a man who just vanished without any reason. Sounds about right. Dave looked at me carefully. Are you okay with that? I took a long drink of water before answering. Outside the window, a maintenance worker was using a leaf blower, trying to push leaves across the parking lot. But the strong October wind kept scattering them back everywhere. It was a losing fight. Was I okay with it? I was 67 years old. I had lived through my parents' divorce, built a construction business during a recession, raised 2 kids, gone through 1 miscarriage that Paula and I never truly talked about, and spent 31 years in a marriage that slowly emptied itself out, like a tree that looks solid on the outside but is hollow inside until the first big storm brings it down. Let her tell her version, I said calmly. Stories always have another part. Dave nodded slowly, watching me. You've got something else going on, don't you? It wasn't really a question. Dave, I said, do you remember back in 2019 when I told you about a conversation I had with Eddie Marsh? Dave froze for a moment, his sandwich stopping halfway to his mouth. Eddie Marsh was a semi-retired private investigator who worked out of a small office above a dry cleaner on Chicago Avenue in Naperville. Dave had actually introduced me to him years ago when I needed help checking a tenant's background. You hired Eddie? Dave asked. 14 months ago, I said quietly. The same week I called Christine. Dave slowly put his sandwich down. Jonathan, what did Eddie find? I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded manila envelope and placed it on the desk between us. I didn't need to open it. I already knew everything inside by heart. The relationship with Craig Hendricks didn't begin 2 years ago, I said. It started 4.5 years ago. And there were also some issues with how Paula was handling the financial side of our business. Payments were made to a vendor called Apex Property Consulting. Invoices that don't match any actual work we ever received. Dave stared at me, his expression turning serious. How much are we talking about? He asked quietly. Over 4 years, I replied. Around $63,000, give or take a little. The room went completely still. She was stealing from your company, Dave said slowly. She was taking money from our company, I corrected him, which matters because it means she was also taking from herself. That tells you something about how sure she was that I would never check. And honestly, she had reason to believe that. For 4 years, I didn't look. But 14 months ago, I started paying attention. And once I did, I couldn't stop. Dave left around 2 in the afternoon. I stayed in room 114 for a while after that, just sitting there, looking out at the parking lot, thinking about everything and nothing at the same time. It's a strange feeling, when a decision you made a long time ago finally starts moving forward in a way that can't be stopped. My phone buzzed at 3:47 p.m. It wasn't Paula and it wasn't Christine. It was a number I didn't recognize, but it had a Chicago area code. I answered. Mr. McCarthy, a man's voice said, calm and professional. My name is Tom Greer. I'm a reporter with the Chicago Tribune business desk. I've been investigating some irregularities at Hendricks Logistics, specifically related to a vendor payment setup involving Apex Property Consulting. I understand you might be familiar with that name. I looked out the window again. The guy with the leaf blower had completely given up. He was just standing there now, holding the machine while the wind moved the leaves however it wanted. I hadn't contacted Tom Greer. I hadn't reached out to anyone at the Tribune, which meant someone else had. and the number of people who knew about Apex Property Consulting was extremely small. "Mr. McCarthy," Tom Greer said again, "are you still there?" "I'm here," I replied. I just needed a second. Because in that moment I realized that the situation I thought I was handling carefully and quietly had a new piece in play, one I didn't put there. And in my experience, the most dangerous moves are always the ones you didn't make yourself. The strongest thing a man can do in a room full of people expecting him to break down is simply not break down at all. I called Tom Greer back at 4:15 p.m. I was standing in the parking lot of the extended stay on Deal Road next to my truck, with the October wind cutting straight through my jacket. "Before we talk," I said, "I need to know who directed you to me." "I protect my sources, Mr. McCarthy," he replied. "I'm not asking for a name," I said. "Just tell me this. Was it someone inside Hendricks Logistics?" There was a longer pause this time. Then he said, "The tip came from someone with direct knowledge of the vendor payment system." I thought about the very short list of people who knew about Apex Property Consulting: me, Christine, Eddie Marsh, Dave, as of just a few hours ago, and one other person, Craig Hendricks. The man who had been involved with my wife for 4.5 years had apparently decided that when things started going bad, he wasn't going to sync with them. Instead, he pushed Paula out first and called the Tribune on his way out. There's a certain kind of justice the world delivers that you couldn't plan even if you tried. When it happens, the smartest thing to do is recognize it and stay out of its way. "Mr. Greer," I said, "I think we should meet." We met the next morning at a coffee shop on Washington Street in downtown Naperville, just a couple of blocks from Christine's office. Tom Greer looked younger than I expected, maybe around 38. He wore a corduroy jacket and had sharp, observant eyes, the kind of eyes that belong to someone who studies people for a living. There was already a recorder on the table before I even sat down. "I brought documents," I said, placing the manila envelope from Eddie Marsh on the table. "I want it clearly stated that I'm not sharing this for personal reasons. I'm sharing it because $63,000 in fraudulent payments went through a business with my name attached to it, and I will not allow my name to be connected to fraud." Tom Greer looked at the envelope like it was something important he had been searching for without realizing it. He opened it and read silently for about 4 minutes. Then he looked up at me. "Did your wife know you had this?" he asked. "No," I said. "Does she know you're here right now?" "Paula hasn't known where I've been for the last 2 days. She's been busy handling her version of events." He almost smiled, but not quite. Then he asked one more question. "The restructuring of McCarthy and Associates. When did that happen?" 14 months ago, I answered. "Fully documented, completely legal, and not connected to any of this situation." He nodded slowly, closed the envelope, and slid it back toward me. "I'll need certified copies of these," he said. "Christine Knight's office will have them ready by noon," I replied. He blinked, slightly surprised. "You already contacted your attorney this morning?" "Mr. Greer," I said, picking up my coffee. "I contacted my attorney 14 months ago. I was back in room 114 on Thursday morning when Christine sent me the link. I sat on the edge of the bed in my undershirt, with a cup of gas station coffee getting cold on the nightstand, and read the article. The headline was calm and professional, the way Tribune headlines usually are, but the content itself was much stronger. Tom Greer had done his work thoroughly. The article explained the Apex Property Consulting scheme in detail: fake invoices, wire transfers, a shell company with no employees, no office, and no real services provided. It clearly named Hendricks Logistics. It mentioned Craig Hendricks directly. And in the 4th paragraph, placed almost casually but with precise impact, it named the operations manager responsible for handling payments on the McCarthy and Associates side, Paula Louise McCarthy, her full name printed in the Chicago Tribune. I read that paragraph 3 times. Then I finished my coffee, got dressed, and called Dave. "You saw it?" Dave said before I could even speak. "I saw it," I replied.